All right. So we left off and we looked at input statements. And we said, well, we can make an input statement and we can make it do all kinds of things. We can take in any value for input. And so we left off on that Trust Fund Buddy program. And so if I go into my folder, and this seems to be a tough thing, is making sure you know where your files are stored. But I had a Trust Fund Buddy program. I'm going to edit it. It pops up in the right window. So in here we figured out, well, not only do we need to get an input, but we need to make sure it's assigned to the right kind of variable. And we have really three different variables we're going to work with primarily in this class. And so on page, oh, you're making it tough. Now I can't see. Oh. So on our Trust Fund Buddy, we have a couple of conversions we want to do. And here we're converting them, and I said we're going to convert those to integers. Well, integers are one type of variable, and remember, integers are just they have no fractional portion. But we might need to do a different kind of number. And so we call them decimals. It's got a fractional value. And so at the bottom of page 43, we show the three different types of variables that we're primarily going to use in Python. So those three variables, we're going to do integers. In other words, no decimal. We can do what's called a string. Well, that makes sense. And we're also going to have one called a float. And that stands for floating point decimal. There are some other variables that we can use, but we're not going to get into those quite yet. So for now, if I wanted to convert those, instead of to convert them to an integer, maybe we realize that, you know what, because they might put in a decimal point, I really should use a float. I'm going to put it in for the price of the car. Now, I'm going to just do it in just one, and I'm going to see what happens. So I'm going to run. And so it says Mercedes tune-up. I'm going to put in 1,075 because I know that when I set up as a float. My apartment, 500, got very cheap, and $100 for a game. Now, weirdly, when I first would look at something like this, I would think it's going to error out on me. And the reason I think it's going to error out is I couldn't add a string and a integer together, right? I couldn't add a number and a string. But Python is actually pretty smart. And as soon as I say I'm using a float in one of these, whenever I add numbers together, and as long as they're either integers or floats, if I add a float to an integer, it'll automatically convert everything to floats. It's not good practice. In practice, what I would really want to do is make sure I have those all done as float if I think that there's going to be a chance of a fractional number in there. Run. So Mercedes tune-up. And so it will return that value. So anytime I see that decimal sign, that tells me that we're working with a float. And so there are some limits on sizes of these integers and floats, but we're not going to quite get to those yet. So page 42, 43 talks about those converting strings to integers. And in some cases, we'd want to convert back from an integer to a string, or a float to a string. And so if I want to display it and not manipulate it, sometimes I will convert the other direction. And so I have, instead of a float, I would have the str, which would convert that back to a string. Now in this case that doesn't make any sense. I have an input of a string and I'm converting it to a string. But if I need to make sure that my input is a string, I can do that, or I need to change it back at some point in the program. All right, so on page 44, they talk about a way to shortcut and make your life even easier. So they have some augmented assignment operators. So I don't honestly use these a lot. And that's just from my experience of typing x equals x plus 5. There are some shortcut ways to do that. For whatever reason, my brain just doesn't process that when I'm typing. So I tend not to use those. But if I wanted to type the same thing as saying total equals total plus 5, notice on here I can do a shortcut. And so I could say total plus equals 5. And that is a shorter way to write it. I just, for whatever reason, when my brain processes things, I don't read that very quickly and say, oh, yep, it's total equals total plus 5. But they actually mean essentially the same thing. You are welcome to use them. It makes life a little shorter. All right, so one last thing we're going to work on here is we're going to put all of these pieces together. And we're going to put all of these pieces together, and we are going to actually start on our car salesman program. So there is a program in here that might help you in some of it called that useless trivia. Make sure you've worked your way through it. But I'm going to start a brand new program here. And I am only going to grab one line to copy here really quickly. So File, New. And I'm going to put this down at the bottom. So all I have to start with is my input that says, hey, you're holding this program open. And I'm going to put my comments up at the beginning. Make sure you put your name, the assignment, you can put in any other information you'd like in there. And so we need to read the question and see what we're looking at in here. And it says, it enters the base price of a car, and then the program adds on a bunch of extra fees. Make tax and license a % of the base price, and the other fees should be set values. Display the actual price of the car once all the extras are applied. So most of you have went car shopping. Is that a fun experience? Would you rather go to the dentist and get a root canal than go car shopping? No. All right, maybe a dentist and just get a cleaning, but no? But a car salesman, generally, we get a base price, and we know that there's all kinds of additional fees. So the first thing I want to think about is we need some variables we're going to use in this. So certainly we could use base price, and we'll set that equal to 0 for now. What other fees and things do you think we're going to need in here? What variables? Oh. Clear coat. So clear coat. And we can go ahead and put a price in there because we know clear coat is something that we often do. What do they charge you at a dealer to put a clear coat on? All right. I'm okay with 500. What other ones? I heard another one out there. Somebody else said something. You kind of have to yell. My ears are all stuffed up from this cold. Doc fee. Oh, my car sales guy over there. Man, I can't make fun of car salesmen when I have one here in class. So what's a typical doc fee, Michael? 200? All right. So, or a documentation fee, if you want to look at it. So, rust. So we'll figure that is, let's go 400 on that one. Okay. So we probably want license. Now, notice something weird happened. When I typed license, what happened? Changed color. So that tells me that it's a reserved word of some sort. So I probably need to change that a little bit. So if I say car license, we can change it to that. So we know we're going to have a tax. So sales tax. And I'm going to set that one equal to 0 because we're going to calculate that one later on, right? Dealer prep. So car sales wizard over there, what's dealer prep normally run us? Oh. All right. So you work at the one honest car dealer in the world. It depends. Different dealers do different things. A destination charge. So if you order a vehicle and they ship it into you, sometimes they'll charge you that, a mileage charge on that. So I think we've got quite a few charges in there. We could use those. So what do we have to do next? So the program says should add on a bunch of extra fees, and the user enters the base price of a car. But we want to probably make it a little more complicated than that. So let's do this. So we have base price. Let's also have make equals model equals. So we have the variables set up. They're just blank. So if I were going to do this, the first thing I would do is come out with a big print statement saying, hey, welcome to Used Cars R Us or something. So come up with an elaborate statement. And you could use tabs. You can do all kinds of things to make it look really, really kind of interesting. So you can embellish your program and you can make it look really, really nice if you'd like to. And so you could put in maybe it'll space it down really nice. You could have all kinds of text and blurbs in there. We are the home of the low price leader. Well, I'd like to get a couple of pieces of information from either the customer or the salesman, whoever it is doing this. It's kind of ambivalent. So I'd like to find out what the make of the car is that they're wanting. So I'm going to do an input statement. And remember, an input, we're going to assign it to a value. So we're going to say make equals. So whatever our input is going to get shoved into make. Please enter the make of your desired car. Great. And then in here, I probably want to space it a little bit. So I'll probably put a colon space space so it looks a little more professional. And I could do the same thing with model then. All right. So at this point, we can actually save this and we can run it. So I'm going to hit my F5 and it says, yep, I got to save it. And I'm going to call this car sales. So I can actually run it and see what happens. And so I could have put in a whole bunch of things to clear the screen. So enter the make of your desired vehicle, Ford. And I want a Ford Pinto. So we can see if that program actually works. It seems to. It doesn't crash yet. And so it's really a good idea to try these things as you go through, making sure that your program doesn't crash. And to double check, I'm going to do a print of make model. So I'm going to add that in there just as a test. Hit F5. And now I want a Chevy and it's going to put out both of those. Nice. Okay. So that actually works. And I can put in those print statements anywhere I want. And here's what I can do that's a really handy thing with those comment tags. I put a comment tag in now, and that's not actually going to do anything. And I could even say, for testing purposes. And it's not going to do anything until I take that comment tag back out. So it's a great way I can check a line and make sure that, hey, I'm getting the right inputs. So I could put up here, this is declaring our variables. So we have one other piece we need to get out of that user. So we also need then that base price is equal to an input please enter the base price of your vehicle. All right. So we get that base price. So now we've got 3 inputs from our user. We could go back in and we could check and we could actually have it output then that base price and make sure it works. So what's our next step in this endeavor? We've got the base price. We've got these items up here. What do we want to do with them? How can I do something with them? So we are going to add some of them, but tax and licenses are a percent of the base price. Oh. So we actually need a couple more variables. So I'm going to go up here where I say sales tax. So I'm going to say sales tax percentage equals. So what's our sales tax here in Auburn or in Peru? 6.5. So 7% is actually the same as what numerically? 0.07. So 7% is the same as saying 0.07. We also need a car license, and it says to do that as a percent. So let's change that to a 0. And we need to have a car license percent. And let's make it easy on ourselves. Let's set that at 5%. So the first thing I would want to do is I would want to figure out how do I get the values in there for those two items. So we could calculate what sales tax and what that car license tax is. So how would I do that? If you had to do it on a piece of paper, how would you do it? Yep, you need the base price. Yep, that'd probably be a good way. But what variable am I putting that in? So my variable I'm going to put things in always goes on the left. And so what I want to do, if I'm doing car license, it's always going to go on the left because that equals really means I'm shoving some value in there. So you said we'd take base price times so just so I know what it is, I'm going to print that then at the end of this statement. So no, because you're multiplying it times 0.05, which we said is 5%. Yeah, we made it a percent already. Now, could we have put this and listed it as 5 and then yeah, we could have done all that. But we just shortcut it and we said we know that 5% is 0.05. So let's see what happens if I run this right now. My make is a fiat. Please enter the base price. 5,000. Oh, I get an error. Why do I have an error in there? I put in $5,000, right? What's that error telling me? Car license not defined. Okay, so did I make a mistake in one of my names? I'd look at double checking those. Car license, so I set it equal to 0. Car license equals base price times car license percent. Oh, no, that looks right. No. Put it in parentheses? We could try that. All right, so there's our whole program, car license. Delete some of those out. So it just drives me nuts not seeing the end of it. All right, so I'm going to do another little thing here, though. I want to make it a little cleaner. Spaces are a great way to do that. All right. I'm going to hit F5. I'm going to run the make of your automobile. Porsche. The model, 911. Base price, $100,000. Huh. All right, so if you didn't create the variable up here, or you've changed the name slightly, you're going to get a different error. So sometimes it's handy just to copy and paste those variable names. But that's not the problem I'm seeing up here. What? Oh, it's what? So anything when we input, what do we input everything as? So if I flip back about 3 or 4 pages in the book, it talks about that. Everything we input comes in as a what? As a string. So if everything comes in as a string, before we can do anything with this as a number, what do we need to do to it? Oh, so this base price is, do we want it as an integer or do we want it as something different? So it's up to you how we do it. Do we want to have decimals or do we not want to have decimals in this program? Not? Okay. We'll round it up. So if we did an integer of everything, now let's see what happens if I run it. So please enter the make of your desired vehicle. Base price, $55,000. Oh, look at that. But notice what happened. Even though I said we're going to convert this to an integer, because it multiplied it by a float, look what it did. It automatically cast it into a float. So since we're going to be using floats, we really should say that this is a float right here. And that way we don't make the program convert from one type to another. Because somebody might put in $9,995.42. All right, so I don't necessarily need this print car license right here. That's just a test statement. So I'm gonna just put a pound sign in front of it. So that's my test. So I could calculate the car license that much. How would I calculate the sales tax? Okay. But remember, I always have to put it into that variable. And in fact, I made a misspelling up there. So I called it sale tax instead of sales. Equals our base price times all right, so now I'm going to run it one more time. And I'm running out of car vehicles brands. I'm buying a Honda. Uh-oh. Crap, I got another error. So it says it's undefined. When I say that, it means, hey, I don't know a number for that. It doesn't have any definition. And I go, well, I know I did because I put it right up here. Oh, it's case sensitive. So making sure I have those exactly the same is critical. So I don't have any print statements that are open right now, so it doesn't tell me anything. But I could certainly put a print statement in there. It doesn't take long. So I could check and see what that sales tax looked like. So sales tax is $700. Now, what you see there is a weird thing. So when I multiplied 0.07 times 10,000, you should get 700 exactly, right? But notice what it does. It does 700, 0.00000, and 0.1 at the very end. So what that is, remember our computers use base 2. They can only understand zeros and ones. And when you convert from zeros and ones, and we convert to decimal back and forth, we have some rounding errors. And so one of those rounding errors is one thing that just showed up there. For our purposes, we're just going to ignore it right this second. But it's something to remember. Decimal isn't the native language of that computer. And when we convert back and forth, we end up with all these weird little errors. And it's very insignificant, but those add up over time. So just a weird example to look at. So ran the program, ran good. So we've got a bunch of data. What do we need to do with it now? We need to output it and show them what's going on. And we could do that pretty easily. You guys have got the hard part down. What's the one thing we still need to do? Do we have a total price yet? Equals 0. So I could say total price equals, and then I could add up all the items I have in there, right? So I could say clear coat plus dock fee plus rust protection plus sales tax. So now I got a value for total price. Oh, I forgot dealer prep. And so now I could run that one more time and I could see what happens. Oh. So it's going to error out. Got it. So clear coat, dock fee, rust protection. What was the other one you said I did? There we go. All right. So let's try it again. All right. So something didn't work right on there. So somewhere in there we have a bit of an error because I put in a total price of the vehicle of 10,000 and in it said my cost was $24.99. What am I missing in there? Yep. All right, so now I can make this very ornate. If this is correct, and we'll run it again, now I've got the bones down. Oh, that sounds about right. $12,499 for my $10,000 vehicle. Got it. So now that I've got that down, and that seems to work, now you can make it ornate. So you could come in with some print statements and say, and you could use any of those techniques you have in the book. You could put in tab stops to make it come to the middle. It includes a, whatever the first one, clear coat. Bless you. And so whatever the clear coat protection was, or we called it. So you could add this and make it very nice and print a very nice little output. You could say all the things that you have in there as charges, what your sales tax, what your license fee is, and totals, that equals X number of dollars. So how you output that is entirely up to you. I would make it at least very functional and demonstrate all the pieces. Make sure you can do the sales tax and the license tax. You can call or you can add additional numbers, values, whatever you'd like in there based on your own shopping experiences.